All right, let's dive into some really interesting English words and phrases today.
Okay, sounds good.
We've got budge up, juxtaposition, knock it off, and ambivalent.
Nice.
These are terms you might hear anywhere, really. Conversations, books, even like art critiques, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So we're going to break them down, look at their meanings, maybe even where they come from, and see what they can tell us about, English and how people use it.
I think that'll be really interesting. So where do we start?
Let's start with budge up.
Okay.
This one, instantly makes me think of being on some crowded London bus.
Right.
And someone's like, all polite, asking me to scoot over a bit.
Makes sense.
It's British, yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely British slang.
And it kind of says a lot about British culture, don't you think? This idea of having to share space and, be considerate of others, even when it's packed.
Oh, absolutely. It's almost like a little dance of politeness, budging up.
Totally. It's funny, the article we're looking at today, it says to think of budge, like a gentle nudge to help remember it.
That's cute.
And it gives some synonyms too, like scoot over, move over.
Yeah.
But those just, I don't know, they don't sound quite as British, do they?
No, they don't have the same charm.
Right. Budge up. It's direct, but still polite.
Exactly.
Okay, so speaking of getting to the point, let's talk about juxtaposition.
Yeah.
Now, this one sounds super academic, but really it just means putting two things next to each other to show how different they are.
Right, to highlight the contrast.
Exactly. Like, picture a movie scene, okay? It cuts back and forth between a peaceful, countryside scene,
Okay.
and then, bam, a chaotic city street.
Ooh, I see.
That contrast, it really makes an impact.
Oh, yeah. And the effect can be, super powerful, Imagine, the beginning of a film like City of God.
Right.
You've got these vibrant colors and this lively music playing in a favela, and then suddenly,
what?
armed drug dealers. Yeah, and that juxtaposition, it sets the whole tone.
Makes sense.
Right. And it hints at what the film's really about. The violence, the poverty.
Wow, that's a great example. I remember that scene so clearly, and now I get how juxtaposition played a part in that.
It's fascinating how these techniques work, isn't it?
It is. The article, it mentions visualizing different objects to remember this word.
Right.
But your example with the movie, that's way more interesting.
Well, I think visuals are just more powerful than thinking about words, especially with a concept like juxtaposition,
Yeah, for sure. Okay, ready for something a little more assertive?
Uh-huh. Oh, yeah.
Knock it off.
Oh, yeah.
Like the ultimate phrase to stop someone from being annoying, right?
Yeah.
Someone's tapping their pen during a meeting, you just want to yell, knock it off.
Yeah, exactly.
It's direct, maybe a bit aggressive even, but it gets the message across.
No messing around.
Nope. And the fact that it comes from American English, that's kind of interesting too.
Yeah, the article says it probably popped up in the early 1900s, maybe reflecting a faster pace of life back then, and a more direct way of talking to each other.
It's crazy how much you can learn about, culture and history just from a phrase.
I know, right? It makes you wonder what other phrases and other languages are like.
Oh, yeah. How they reflect different cultures.
Exactly. Language is always changing, always adapting to, what's going on in society.
That's so cool. Okay, last word for today, ambivalent.
Right.
This one's for when you're feeling totally torn.
Torn.
Yeah, imagine you get offered your dream job.
Okay.
But it means moving away from everything you know and love.
Ooh.
You're excited, but also terrified.
Yeah.
That's ambivalence.
Makes sense.
And get this, the word comes from Latin.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Ambi meaning both, and valentia meaning strength.
Wow, so it's like having two strong feelings at once.
Exactly, like battling it out inside you.
That's a good way to put it.
The article uses this analogy of a seesaw to explain it. But I think a real-life situation, like that job offer, makes it much clearer,
Yeah, definitely. It's not about feeling nothing. It's about having strong feelings on both sides.
Right. It's complex.
It is. It's like a very human thing to feel.
Totally. So there we have it. 4 words.
4 words.
Each with its own little story and background.
It's amazing how much depth there is in language.
I know, right? It's like you think you know a word, but then...
There's always more to discover.
Exactly.
Yeah. And it's like you said earlier, it really shows how language isn't just about, talking to each other. It says something about our culture, our history, all the stuff we all experience together.
It's funny you should mention that. I was just thinking about how budge up and knock it off, they're both kind of about asking someone to do something.
Yeah.
But they have totally different vibes, right?
That's true.
One is super polite, all about sharing space, and the other one is like straight up telling someone what to do.
I see what you mean. And that difference probably says something about how people communicate in those cultures, right?
Oh, for sure. Like,
Yeah.
budge up. It's more subtle. You're going to rely on everyone understanding the situation.
Yeah.
While knock it off is just like, bam, no more discussion.
Straight to the point. No room for misunderstanding.
Makes me wonder if those differences came about because of where those phrases, like, originated.
Oh, interesting.
Like picturing budge up in a crowded British pub.
Okay.
Versus knock it off in like a busy American factory or something.
Yeah, maybe. Remember the article said knock it off probably got popular in the U.S. in the early 1900s? At a time when things were changing fast, lots of industry and cities growing.
Right.
So maybe people needed to talk to each other more directly to get things done.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And speaking of history, I'm curious about juxtaposition, like in art and literature.
Okay.
It sounds kind of fancy, right?
Yeah.
But I bet artists have been using that technique forever.
Oh, absolutely. Think about ancient Roman architecture. They would mix in Greek designs with their own style.
Oh, interesting.
That blend of different styles, it created this visual contrast, right? A way of layering history.
I never thought about it that way. So juxtaposition isn't just about putting, like, opposite images next to each other.
Not necessarily.
It can also be about mixing styles and ideas.
Exactly. And that can make people think more deeply about how those elements connect.
Right. Kind of like how ambivalent describes those complicated feelings we get sometimes.
Yeah.
It's not about feeling nothing. It's about feeling lots of strong things all at once.
That's a good point. And literature is full of that kind of complexity.
Totally. Like, think about Shakespeare's Hamlet.
Oh, yeah.
He's famous for being torn between wanting revenge and then having all these moral doubts.
Right. His to be or not to be speech is a classic example of ambivalence.
He's wrestling with all these conflicting desires, and the audience is right there with him, feeling that turmoil.
Exactly. And it's through language, through words like ambivalent, that we can understand those feelings.
You know, as we've been talking now, I've realized that all these words, budge up, juxtaposition, knock it off, ambivalent, they really highlight how important context is.
How so?
Whether it's the culture behind budge up or the history of knock it off or the emotions tied to ambivalent, understanding the context helps us really get these words.
You're right. It's like context is the key to unlocking the full meaning of a word.
Without that context, we miss out on the richness of the language, right?
Totally. We're like tourists in a new country. We can understand the basic signs, but we don't get the deeper meaning.
Exactly. So as we wrap up our look at these four words, I think it's safe to say we've learned way more than just their definitions.
I agree.
We've explored where they come from, their cultural baggage, their emotional impact, and how important context is.
And through that, we've gained a better understanding of how language reflects our world, shapes our thoughts, and connects us to each other.
Yeah, it's been quite the journey, hasn't it? Like uncovering all these hidden meanings and cultural connections just from four words.
And you know what's really cool? This is just the tip of the iceberg, right? There are so many other words and phrases out there waiting to be explored.
That's what I love about language.
Yeah.
It never gets boring. There's always something new to discover.
It's like a never-ending treasure hunt for word nerds.
Exactly. You know, as we've been talking, I've been thinking about how budge up, juxtaposition, knock it off, and ambivalent, they're not just words. They're like tools.
Tools.
And tools that we can use to communicate better, to express ourselves more clearly, and to understand the world around us.
Oh, I like that. And the more tools we have, the better we can navigate all the, the complexities of language and thought.
Right. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with a challenge. Keep exploring. Pay attention to the words you hear every day, the phrases that make you curious, the slang that makes you laugh.
Yeah, don't just accept them at face value, dig a little deeper.
Exactly. Uncover their origins, their cultural baggage, those hidden meanings.
And don't be shy about asking questions either.
What kind of questions?
Like, why is this word used this way? What historical events or social trends might have shaped its meaning? How does it reflect the values of the people who use it?
The more you question, the more you learn.
Absolutely. And the more you learn, the more you appreciate how rich and complex the English language really is.
It's a journey that never ends.
Yeah.
And one that I hope our listeners will continue with, enthusiasm and an open mind.
So keep those ears open, keep those minds engaged, and keep those dictionaries handy.
The world of words is out there waiting to be discovered.
Who knows, maybe you'll even find some linguistic gems that we missed today.
Until next time, happy word nerding, everyone.